um, put your video on, say hello, see some familiar names, and that's always nice. This is my um, this is my home library. I do presentations all over, I guess, the tri-state area. So this is a new presentation for me, and I'll be giving it about 20 other times for the rest of this month for women's history. So I figured I'd
Nice.
try it out on my home base, and hopefully it goes over well. Um, so let me do my screen share here. Okay, I've learned through trial and error that I have to screen share first and then start the slideshow because I can't do it the other in reverse. So if anybody's wondering, that's how you do it. So I guess we'll get started. And if my library helper wouldn't mind, um, are you listening?
Yes.
Oh, from the library?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Okay, just making sure. If you could just admit people as they come in, that would be
Sure, yeah.
fantastic. And also, too, if there's anybody in the chat and you happen to see it and I'm not addressing them, because when I'm screen sharing, I have a hard time being able to access the chat. So, um, yeah, so my name is Sarah Gutman. I am a professional genealogist. I have been doing this since I was 13 years old. I'm 38 now. I'm going to be 39 next month. Um, not 40 yet, but I've been doing this for a while, and I've had the pleasure of seeing the ease of accessing records really just be fantastic. So you don't have to kind of go to a library or a courthouse so much as you can push a button and you get the records that you're looking for. So today we're going to be focusing on finding your female ancestors. Um, and I think myself included, all guilty of it at some point, that if we focus on, if you've been doing this for a while, we all tend to focus on the men. And especially we're interested in the paternal line, that last name. Um, and a lot of times our ancestors who are women are kind of a byline. We don't know very much
Mm-hmm.
about them. So this presentation, we're going to have to use the men, but we're going to be able to use the men to bring our ancestors, females, into light. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight is getting to know your history and why that's important. I'm going to have you go on a scavenger hunt, not right now, because I want you to listen, but after this, you can start your little scavenger hunt, see what you can find. We'll examine some marriage records. Um, we're going to look for her in different types of print. Um, I'll show you how to look at lineage societies to see if she was documented in any I always mess that up. Any lineage societies. I'm in the DAR too, by the way. Because a lot of these lineage societies do have a family tree for your ancestors, and then you can hook onto that, which is really cool. We'll talk about getting to know the men in her life, brothers, sons, uncles, husbands, obviously, fathers. Um, we'll look at all the different types of records that are available. Um, we'll familiarize ourselves too a little bit with the law, because women's appear in records based on the law, and knowing that. And we'll talk a little bit about how to utilize their DNA. So I always tell people that we're so much more than a name, a date, and a place. Um, and you really want to focus on what happens in between those two numbers. What happened between the birthday and the death day? And you want to do that. One of the easiest ways of doing that is looking at history, and looking at history in a global sense, but also looking at the history of the local town. and kind of placing the woman in there. Figure out what was going on. My life in 2021 is much different from somebody who lived in Nebraska in 1912. There's a huge difference. There's a big difference from me living here on Long Island than there is me living, say, in Alaska. So geography is going to play a really important role. Their social history, their social status is also going to play a really important role about what's happening them. The churches that they belong to, the religious organizations, all these things are going to play a role in who your female ancestor developed into. And if you ever heard the expression her story, so we're going to use his story to kind of create her story. And a lot of it kind of has to be implied. My husband just walked in the door, and he'll probably make a face about this, but I had used some history that I had found for one of my female ancestors, and I had written about how she had contemplated murdering her husband. And he found it, but he thought I was writing it. So
That's
you
funny.
know, and he was like, "What is this?" It was a notebook, and he, and I had to explain that this was from a woman, who from the 1880s, and her family was involved in the Italian mafia and a whole big thing. So just placing that into there, and write a footnote is these are not my thoughts. So really kind of look at history, even just something as simple as just Wikipediaing an error is going to kind of give you a little bit of context. So I'm going to send you on a scavenger hunt. The first thing to do is look around. And these are all items that, these are not the actual items, but these are items very similar to the ones that I have in my possession. My mother in her house has this Singer sewing machine, and it's from 1905. It belonged to my great great grandmother. And she's contemplated throwing it out many times, but I won't let her. And just thinking about all the time that my great great grandmother spent on this sewing machine as an Italian immigrant, what was her life like making the clothes for her children? And I then was able to find, it's in the immigrant museum, I'm sorry, the tenement museum in New York City. There's actually a picture of my family, that very family, sitting around a table, um, sewing clothes by piecemeal. So, like thinking about that. And now this is just 8 years ago, I found the picture when I went to this museum. And, just knowing that that was kind of a piece of history.
Wow.
My mother had also been passed down these odd looking pine cone men. And they had belonged to her great grandma, and they were seen on something that was a Christmas tradition, that's over about 100 years old now, that these pine cone men had been kind of these eyewitnesses almost to the family tradition that's going on. Creepy old dolls, like, they tell a story. If you have any type of jewelry, that's probably the easiest thing that people look for. Is there any type of jewelry that has been passed down? Any type of antique dolls and like weird things. My aunt has this, and I couldn't get a picture of it because it's such a rare find, and thank God that it is rare because it's hideous. This disgusting red cat that sits in their walkway when you walk into the house, and it just doesn't go with anything else. But it was somebody's mother's mother. Was my uncle on my uncle's side, and I guess that cat was always just in the hallway of the houses. And it's just these objects that these people held on to because people did not have that consumer culture that we have today. Objects, you put a lot of thought into what you were getting. And what I would suggest doing, if you have something, go get it appraised. Especially jewelry. Jewelry is very easy to get appraised. You can go into a You can go into a jewelry store and just say, can you just tell me what time period this is from? You don't even have to ask for money, but just ask somebody else to kind of put it in a time frame. And then also too, take a look at old pictures, because sometimes, and maybe more often than you think, you will find people holding these very items in these old pictures. One of, not this doll, but I have a doll that is found in a box. And it turns out this doll belonged to my grandmother's sister, who died in 1925 of appendicitis. And this, she was 5 years old, and she had this doll, the very doll in the picture. It just kind of told like a little bit of a story. And women are known for being the storytellers in the family. And I'm sure there's lots of men that are too, but I know in my family, we women just don't shut up. So we're the ones telling stories. We're the ones usually going out and collecting things and bringing them back. And why do we have these? Even in something, I have a collection of old books, like first edition books of one is The Wizard of Oz, one is Winnie the Pooh. And just even seeing the handwriting of my great grandma, writing that these books belong to her. It's just so nice. And sometimes you can even find an old letter inside the pages. And I found that too. And it's just I like get chills. I'm such a dork. You get chills, thinking about the thing. So look around your house, see what items you have, especially if it's something that, you're just really not sure how it got there. Go have it looked at. Try to find who it belonged to in that person's story. Now, of course, one of the easiest ways that we think of is pictures, and getting a sense of what was going on in people's lives in these pictures. I took a few different ones here. One is, and I always point with my hands, but I forget you can't see it. If you can see right here, this is my husband's side, and this was his great grandma right here. Okay, and she had a mystery father, which supposedly is this person right here, but I think this person looks too young to be a boy, but a dad. That's just my opinion. I just don't think it is. But anyway, I had been doing a lot of research on this picture, and I just want to hear other people's thoughts on this. Looking at this picture right here, what could you maybe infer about it? What do you think this is a picture of?
I thought it was a picture of a boat.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I did too. And I'm thinking to myself, I got this awesome picture of this immigrant family coming off a boat. Like how great is this? Well, I did some research because I found out these people, well, he was an immigrant, but these other people were not. So I thought, that's a little bit weird, that these people who were not immigrants were on a boat. So I did some research, and sure enough, this Olympic was not actually a boat that existed. This actually was taken in Coney Island, and they had some of these backdrops, like as we do today, like these silly backdrops, and people would take pictures in them. So Google the words that are clues in pictures to kind of put them at it. And sure enough, these people lived in Brooklyn.
Wow.
So that kind of brought that into there. And you kind of think, okay, what was going on at Coney Island at the time? Over here is my great grandma and her mother. And if I didn't know the year of this picture, there's a couple of clues that I could have in here. One is obviously what they're wearing. I mean, I wouldn't be seen dead in this. So, you kind of look at the fashion, of course. Knowing the family by census records, I can kind of place them in a certain age bracket because at one point she had 10 children. So the fact that she's only being seen with 3 of these children are going to, unless, the other ones were just being real jerks and they were not, posing and like, get out of here. But likely she's spending the time. And this is one of the pictures. There's also a lot of these pictures you'll see have the photographer's name on here and the location. So if I had just found this in a box and I didn't know who was in this picture, I could look at who are my ancestors in Coalport. There's also a really cool website there's a few websites out there, I should say, that if you see the mark, this is considered a mark of a photographer, you can put the mark of the photographer in there, and it tells you how long that person was in business for and where they were in business. And that's going to give you a clue too of who's in the picture. And of course, if you're lucky, always flip your picture over and see if anybody wrote on it. My mom is super meticulous about that, that she writes like the person's like what they had for dinner that night on the back of pictures. So whoever finds her pictures one day will be in good hands. Another picture, this is my 91-year-old grandma here. And you could just tell what, just gathering from this picture, anybody want to kind of take a guess at
Can
her?
I ask a question?
Sure.
I have a picture of my father
Mhm.
and he's wearing a dress. Could some of these be
Yes.
boys?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. My grandfather was born in 1913, and up until you're about age 10, for fancy occasions or pictures, they were always put in dresses.
Really? I didn't know
Why?
that.
Why was that?
That was just the style. And my grandpa had wrote something about that. He remembers going and buying his youngest brother his first pair of pants, and that was a big thing. And it's interesting too. I had read this article, and it's all about the history of color and how pink was originally associated as a boy color and blue was a girl color. But thanks to the catalogs, for I think it was Macy's, it flipped it. So a lot of times you could also see these pictures, if you were lucky enough to get a colorized one, of an ancestor in pink, and they're likely a boy. So that's really cool. But yes, that's definitely a thing. So, and you can research too about when people switched over into wearing pants. This here's my 91-year-old grandma. Just by looking at this, what could you maybe tell me about her as a person? And feel free to say whatever you want. I don't care.
She didn't really want to get dressed up.
No, she actually loved getting dressed up. She's wearing a mink.
Yeah, she has a sense of fashion.
Yeah, she's a very, very fashionable lady. This is considered a very lovely coat. She's got earrings on, and if you could tell, her makeup's all done. But it kind of also just gives you a sense of like what these people I have, like these boudoir pictures of my grandma, and it's a little bit weird, but like whatever. So these pictures, just look at them and kind of get a sense of the people's images. So when you're looking at a picture, some things to consider is obviously who are the people in the picture. Are they how many people are in the picture, especially if you're placing a family in a time frame. Take a look at the clothing. And also Google, different clothing. What period were boys seen in dresses is a great example. Street signs, these little tiny things that you wouldn't notice that can kind of place somebody in a particular area. There could be a street sign in the back, blow it up on your computer. Also the cars that are there. Take a look at the different types of cars. And Google Images is great for this kind of stuff. You can upload, I don't know what site it is, but I know there's a thing where you can upload it and it'll tell you what car is in the picture, and it gives you the year of the car. So that's kind of cool. What type of photo is it? Is it a tin type? Is it, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this word here because I can't say it. I'm going to just sound like an idiot if I do. But the different types of photos take place in different, are simulated with different time periods. So you can kind of get a sense of that.
In the older pictures, I never saw them smiling. That was just the fashion?
No, it had to do with the way that it was exposed. So it would just take a longer time. They would be sitting there for a while. And based on, again, if they're smiling or not smiling, it's going to take them, unless they're my children, who are 5 and 6 and are just crazy. You can tell them to smile and they, do whatever. but based on their facial expressions, you can kind of also put them in a sense. The smiling was not even a thought. You just want to look still, whatever. That'll give you a time period. The items, those items that you find around your house, can you see them in any picture? Now, some photographers did have props that they would just use in the background, so don't put too much pressure emphasis on it. But if anything like jewelry, especially if you wondered if great great grandma had a wedding ring and you see her wearing it, you can go and you can maybe ask around if anybody has that, what happened to it. Again, any words, and that name and location of the photographer. Now I'm going to share these slides with you so you don't have to worry about writing things down. I'll send it to the library and they can pass it along to you. This is not really something I have in my family because my mother and my grandmother were awful cooks. My grandmother was known, these are old recipes. My grandmother was known for inviting friends over and then disappearing for a while and going to a local German restaurant and bringing back food. So that would be her recipe. However, my husband's mother has created these actual beautiful scrapbooks of old recipes. And, if you think about it, even still today, women spent a lot of their day preparing meals for their family. And that meant so much to them, especially in our immigrant ancestors, which is pretty much all of us at some point or another. Those meals reflect the culture. It affects the ingredients, what was being used. You can also sometimes see things are being crossed out. Maybe some ingredients are not available anymore on the market and they're being substituted. And if you just think
found a whole bunch. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I just found a whole bunch of old recipes from my grandmother, and a lot of the recipes have lard in it. So
yes,
if I want to convert it, I have to think, well, I don't really want to use lard. What can I use? But
yes.
yeah, it was very exciting to find those recipes. I love it.
No, that's awesome. Like those things like that. I have a little silly story to tell. So my mother has a recipe box, and my mother's an awful cook, as I just mentioned, but a friend had come over, a nice Italian friend came over, and she made a delicious macaroni salad. So we told her to get recipe from Mrs. Conti. So my mother makes the recipe and it's disgusting. It's like, we were like, this is the grossest thing I've ever had. What did you do to this? She got all offended, you hate my cooking. Years later, my mother's cleaning out her cupboard and she starts hysterical laughing. I'm standing there and she's like, remember that time I made you Mrs. Conti's macaroni salad? She's like, I actually confused the recipe. That was actually a vegetable dip that I had put in the macaroni.
Oh, no.
So I was like, that was disgusting. But you have like anything like that, like these stories that happen around the table. So many memories are just being shared over the generations of these things. Mm-hmm. And that's really what is meant. My grandmother, my 91-year-old grandmother, she created, a recipe book of her favorite things that her mom had given. And it's just so nice to see. So keep that in mind. Make the food. I had also one time my aunt had given me some recipes from my grandma, the one who went out to the store. So I had my family come over and I made the meal of everything that my grandma had. And we tasted it and it was gross. And I was so sad because I spent so much time, and my dad was like, well, your grandmother was a horrible cook, so I don't know what you were expecting. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. So
there we go.
Some other things that you may have around. And again, a lot of times these things are inside of books, photo albums that you wouldn't have noticed, boxes, or letters and diary entries. So think to yourself, why would somebody save this? This is obviously something, unless they were just saving all the 30% Kohl's coupons for the last 28 years in a box, hopefully they're still holding on to things that are meaningful to them. So find out, see if you can find any letters or diary entries. This is here. I had taken, this is a letter. It was about a 5-page letter that my grandma had written in 1931 to her parents, and she was a freshman in Skidmore College in this letter. And she talks about how her friends found a stray dog and how they hid it in the dorm room. And then the police officer came and, they had to get rid of the dog, but oh, what fun we had. And she said, thank you so much for, she actually, I guess she was constipated. Her parents sent her something for that. And I had to look it up, and I was like, because she was like, thank you so much for blah, blah, whatever this medicine was. I feel so much better now. And then she just said something also too about she was looking at a hotel. It was $5 too much to spend on a little trip that she was going to make. And it's just really nice to see that, and you can kind of get a sense of the relationships there that are happening between people. In another letter that I had found, my great grandfather was in World War I, and he had written letters to my great grandmother. Now, when you think of these war letters between couples, you think of like this great love story. Well, my great grandfather had a one night stand with my great grandmother, and then my grandma came out. So he's writing in these letters like, hey, think you might have had the baby by now. Hope you're well. So, you see this very awkward conversation of these people trying to get to know each other over the course of he's over there. And she's in Massachusetts. So you get a sense of this that you would definitely not get if you were just looking at a marriage record. So see what you have. Also, if you can find one of these is like the gold mine for genealogy, is a family Bible. And you might be thinking, I have absolutely none of this stuff, but maybe somebody in your family, your extended family does. My one of my second cousins, who I've never met, gave me a copy of this because he had heard through the grapevine that I like genealogy. And this is my great grandfather's family Bible. And in the people's family Bibles, they would record, and it was usually the woman doing it, who would record those life events, birth, marriage, and death. And a lot of times holy orders if people joined a religious order too. But you would find these in a family Bible. And if you don't have a family Bible, a lot of times people will find these and they will donate them to a historical society in the area. So especially if you're from a smaller town, your family's from a smaller town, contact the local historical society and ask them, do you have a family Bible for the Baker family, for the Gutman family? Okay, thank you. Yep. And of course, one of the best ways to find out about a woman is her marriage record. Her marriage record, I'm going to just kind of show you this because I want to see this marriage record. You would think does not have a lot of information on it, but it does. And I want to see if people would be able to gather this. So this marriage record is for Robert McColgan and Mary McLaughlin. Okay. At the time of their marriage, this is in 1850, by the way. He's 37, she's 38. He is a laborer, she is domestic. They're both from Ireland. His parents' names are John and Mary, and her parents' names are Patrick and Mary Doherty. And it says second here. What can you tell me about Mary McLaughlin by seeing this?
Her maiden name might have been Dougherty if she kept her second marriage name.
What was her second marriage name?
McLaughlin.
Yes, very good. Yeah, so she, if you were just looking at this record and you didn't notice the parents' names, you would have probably assumed, or you didn't notice the second here, okay? You probably would have assumed that her name was Mary McLaughlin, and you might have started tracing a McLaughlin family, which is not on the family tree. This woman actually had a baby with this man, McLaughlin, Robert McLaughlin, and he was walking out one day to go hunting, and he waved goodbye, and he turned around and his gun went off and he killed him.
Oh my
So he
God.
died. And so she went over with her brothers to America. Um, and again, by looking at that, you would have no idea that that happened. And it was really kind of diving into these different records that you're able to find things like that. Now, also knowing with marriage records, one of the things that you can find too, which is really cool, are marriage announcements in newspapers. And this here is my grandma to my grandpa's. You see, they got married in 1949. But they also have marriage announcements that date back to the 1700s that you can find. And can anybody tell me just from this marriage announcement, some things you can learn about my grandma in here? And again, I'm not doing this to kind of showcase my family, but just to kind of give an activity about how to extract information about women. So can anybody maybe tell me who her parents were, where she was from?
Oh, it says it right there.
What's that? Where was she from? Or who were her parents?
Mr. and Mrs. Harold Paul.
Yeah, great. What did she do for work? Or what was her education?
Let's see.
Oh, she was a
Graduate of
lab
Skid-
technician.
Mm-hmm.
Graduate of Skidmore College.
Mm-hmm.
Employed as a lab tech.
What was my grandpa?
Let's see.
Landscape architect.
Yeah, he actually just cut the grass. And not to insult my grandparents, but my grandmother had a much better education than my grandfather by knowing that. And that made a really big difference in their marriage, and also just you kind of think about what kind of a woman would be be able to go and get a master's degree from Skidmore College in the 1930s.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. And if you also find out that's how they met. They both met just by knowing that they met at St. Agnes Hospital. I'm just seeing it. Oh, I had some things in chat. Good. Skidmore College landscape artist. Great. And if you have these nice pictures over here, this is a different one of my grandma. So you can find these. You can find these marriage announcements. You can find them in the newspapers.com, and I have a list of it over there. You can call local historical societies, local libraries, and check out and say what newspapers were around at the time that these events happened, and perhaps you have access to this. I know our library, which I use a lot, has Newsday. They have the New York Times database. Also, this is actually a really cool thing. If you live in New York, which we do, you can be a member of the New York Public Library. And you can do that online. And it's free. You just fill out the form, you send them your driver's license, and then with that, you have access to like all the newspaper collections in New York, which is really, really cool. So that's a fun thing to do. Also along the same lines as newspapers, you can just find this is my great grandma. So just some newspaper articles that she appeared in. She still makes rugs. Cool. She is in good health. We have an obituary for her. And a lot of times, what do you notice about this? What is her name going as? Like if I was to do a search, what would I want to search under?
Her married name.
Yeah, Mrs. A lot of times women were not referred to by their first name. So if you were doing a search for me, you would search for Mrs. Gutman, or you could search for Mrs. James Gutman. Sometimes you might find Sarah Gutman, but not always. And you could do first name, last name, and switch it around that way, because some of our computer system databases are not smart enough to know that that's what you're looking for. So you can kind of play around with those things.
Yeah, I have a question about that because I've been doing research on ancestry.com and I'll look up like my grandfathers and I can get some stories about them. But the grandmothers, when they ask for her name, do I put just her married name or do I also put her maiden name or just her maiden name?
So
I
for
don't know.
Ancestry, I always do multiple ones. And in your Ancestry tree, do you have a tree on Ancestry?
Yes.
Okay. When you do, and this goes for anything, if you're doing a tree, you just put the woman in by her maiden name. You never put them in by their married name. So
Okay.
in my tree, I'm Sargadati. And all the women go by that. And so if you're doing a search on Ancestry and you're doing it by the person, it should automatically filtrate it so that it's picking up automatically the maiden name and the married names.
Okay. That's what I did wrong then. Thank you.
No problem. There's also some really cool stuff in church and town books because we didn't have things like Facebook and Instagram to tell you what's going on with people. These churches and towns would publish like every 10 years or so, these kind of like what's new with my members books. And if you go on Google Books, which is totally free, and it's a little bit different to get to than regular Google. So it's Google Books. And what I do is because I mean, I don't know about you, but I know that my family wasn't the writing type. They weren't going to write a book or anything like that. But I will Google the towns that they live in. And from there, Google Books is going to show up maybe the town of Yonkers, Patton, Pennsylvania, whatever, these different books. And you can go inside the books and they, prior to 1924, are free to look at. You can go and you can look at the images as long as they've been scanned. And there's like, I think they said like 32 million books on there. And most of them are town histories. So that's cool. You can go into the town history and search for the names. So this is just the name of one of the parishioners in the town, this lady, Veronica Freehoff. And it just gave a story about her family, where they came from, I think in Germany. So really cool stuff that you wouldn't expect because it's not something that we have today. They ran things a little bit differently back then. And this is kind of a fun thing. They have on Ancestry a yearbook collection. And it's yearbooks that date back to 1905. And it's one of their biggest collections that they have. And you can type in your family's names. They have both colleges and high schools. This is my mother's yearbook, and serves her right for not coming to my genealogy presentations. I throw pictures of her in here. So you can kind of get a sense of this about what the person was or who they were. My mom, and my mom has seen this before, and she's like, I wish I changed this. David was her ex-boyfriend that she dated for 10 years. She loves Twinkies, but now she has celiac disease. P, and P. I thought she had to go to the bathroom all the time, but I guess she had all her dogs were named with P. So that's why she had that in there. You can find out these little things about these people. I found my grandpa's one from the 40s, and like he was just as adorable as ever in it. And it's a fun thing to do, and look at your female ancestors that way. Now, a lot of times, especially in the earlier part of this, not this century, last century, women would join these societies, and they would join church societies. Sometimes with veterans, they would get involved in them. And if you can find that out, if they're part of that, usually in their obituary, it'll say, and, Mrs. Baker was a proud member of the St. Augustine Rosary Society. Go online and Google that. What did they do? Get an idea of what her activities were. Why was this important to her? Now, if you're lucky, they might have joined a lineage society. As I had previously mentioned, I am a daughter of the American Revolution, and they have a fantastic database that you can go on. And I have this in another presentation because it's a little bit intricate. But you can go on the DAR database, and they have a genealogy section, and you can search by ancestor. So if you know your Revolutionary War ancestor, you can search by that, but you can also search by descendant. So I can put in my great grandma's name, back line, and it's going to pop up that she was related to these individuals because other people had submitted applications under that, and it's going to show me their trees and the documentation linking that, proving that. So you can go on these lineage societies and look up your ancestors' trees. So that's kind of cool. Now, one of the things you may want to really keep in mind is that many cultures, women are keeping their maiden names. They do. That is really an American thing, that women are changing their names. And I know in the Italian culture, women keep their names, and some European places, it's actually against the law for the woman to take on the husband's name. They can use it just because it's easier on the invitations, whatever, but the woman actually never changes her name. So do some research too on the culture and the customs of that area about what's going on with that. And I'll show you a reason in a minute why that's important. So of course, we have to know the men. It's a little bit ironic that this is a remembering the ladies, but in order to really kind of learn about the ladies, we have to learn about the men who are important to their lives. I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for my husband and my sons and my brother, my dad. But get to know the men in their lives, because a lot of times women are going to be found under their names and in relationship to them. And if you don't know who they are, those men in her lives, you're not going to find the women. So some records to consider when you're doing some genealogy research, and this is with men or women. You want to look for birth records, also church records, baptismal records, marriage, death, passenger list if you have some immigrants, naturalization records, which is when we become American citizens. Now, unfortunately, for the majority of time, women were automatically, well, I mean, I guess it was good, grandfathered in with their husbands. When their husbands became citizens, so did the women. They didn't have to apply themselves. Another reason why
I didn't know.
it's important to know the men in their lives. So based on the year, you will or will not find a naturalization record for a woman. Draft cards. Now, women are not being drafted. However, those men in her life may list them as people who will always know you, and they will write the relationship to that person, wife, sister, mother, and their address. Pension records. Now, if you have somebody who fought in the Civil War, the best, if not one of the best resources for that is the widow's pension. And you can find that on Fold3, fold3.com. It's I think the library has a free subscription to that. I know that they do have a free subscription of Ancestry that you can access from home. You can go on there, and if you search Civil War, widow's pension, you can then search by name. You would search by the husband's name, not the lady's name, but it's going to be granted to the woman, the widow, and it's going to give us all this detail about it, and also the detail about the husband's military service. So that's a really fun find. Last will and testaments. Women did write them. They will mention that's also too, when the men leave it, you'll see how they leave their land oftentimes to the wife or in care of somebody else to care for the wife. And here is some allotted money to care for them. They can also set money aside to pay for the woman's funeral when she passes. And these do go very far back. I have one of my ancestors, she died in 1790. She created the will that I found. So they definitely do exist. Land records, which I'll talk about in a second, are a little bit harder to find based on the laws. And estate records, again, go back to last will and testaments. Estate records are really a great inventory of the person's house. Back then, they itemized everything. I can't imagine doing that. I don't even want to put away the laundry. Like, I can't imagine, itemizing every item in my house. But again, you're going to see what they have, what was valuable to that woman: linens, candlesticks, all these things that may play such a minor role in our lives today were so important to them back then. If she had a hot iron, like, you're living large here, your pots, whatever. And of course, as we just mentioned before, those town and church publications, check those out. Now, if you did not know the men in her life, you would miss one of my ancestors on here. So this is my great grandmother is on this passenger list. Now, her sons are the Frigettis. They're down here. Where's my mouse? Okay, so they're down here, the Frigetti family. Okay. If you did not know her maiden name, you would not have seen that I have two screens working, and for some reason they're not communicating with each other about where my mouse is right now. But you would not see that Carmina Paolino is with her children right here. Her brother is also with them. You would think maybe this is a married couple, whatever. This is actually that woman I was telling you about, who I wrote the story about how she was going to murder her husband. That's her right here. And she really had a great case for murdering him because she came to America thinking she was joining him, like, as a surprise, only to come here that he already had an American wife. So he had
Oh my
5
God.
kids in Italy. He comes here and she's married. So you can trace that in the record of them hating each other and going back and forth. So that was
Wow.
like a crazy thing. So anyway, if I didn't know her last name, I would not have known that Carmela had immigrated at this time period. So don't keep that in mind, especially with passenger list. You're looking for them under their maiden name, even if they're married.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
did the husband know that she was coming to America, or she
I
just
don't
came?
think so, because I would have gotten rid of my wife.
Yeah.
But
Or
he
move
was
to a different
pronouncing
town.
her dead.
Well, I guess
Um,
communication was so difficult then, you couldn't, I don't know.
Well, I don't think it was that difficult because he went back to go visit her and he got her pregnant while he was already married. So, he had a little trip across the Atlantic, came back to his wife here, and the fun and it was a really interesting story. And you can tell just in these records, they just hated each other. And then they're buried at the same grave together.
I
So,
think there were a lot of stories like that. There's a story
yeah.
like that in my family too, where they come to America and start a whole new family.
Oh my gosh, I'd kill him.
Wow. I never even thought of that.
Yeah. So that's a cool
I had
thing.
to relook at my records.
Yeah. So one of the other great places to find any ancestors are census records. You see them in here with the family. They give you some information about them, what their jobs are. You're getting their ages, what year they were married. I think this is like the saddest question. In the 1900 and the 1910 census, they asked the women, how many children have you had and how many are still alive? And you can see here, there's a number difference right here. Mary had 6, 4 were living. I know her daughter May died from tuberculosis. I don't know what happened to the other child here. So that's a mystery to me. But you can kind of check that out. Now, things to remember in the census record is prior to the 1850s, only the head of household was named. And most of the heads of households were men. However, if you were a woman and you were more of an exception to the rules and you happen to own property, you would be listed also as the head of household. But a lot of times if your husband died, you'd hope to get married again quickly, or you would go live with one of your children or a brother to take in. There was no strong independent females back then. Well, at least not too many of them. And in the 1860 census, we start seeing when they'll name people in the 1850s. That's when women start appearing in the census. And then the 1860s, they'll give you the relationship. So you might have, you might have what you would assume to be a husband and a wife living together, but it could be a brother and a sister living together, under the same last name. So those are just some things to kind of keep in mind. Familiarize yourself with the law, and you don't have to become a law student or anything like that, but just be familiarized with the law in your area. I just put these up because I thought these are kind of interesting, some of them. In 1664 in Maryland declared that English women who married a slave then had to live as a slave of their husband's master. So that was a kind of a deterrent to marry a slave. Don't, because then you're a slave now. In 1718, Pennsylvania women were allowed to own and manage property in their own name during the incapacity of their spouse. In Mississippi, this is one of the first, they had these property acts, and this is one of the first one in Mississippi. The Married Women Property Act grants married women the right to own but not control property in her own name. A lot of times, especially in these older records, you'll see maybe a newspaper article that has the obituary of a man who passed. And then a few days later, there'll be another smaller ad that says the estate of Alphonsus Baker that was granted to his wife Romana is now being managed by Thomas Ritter. A man still needs to be in control of it. This one's crazy. In 1850, Illinois, when Illinois opened its first hospital for the mentally ill in 1851, the state legislature passed a law that within 2 years of its passage, it amended that it required a public hearing before a person could be committed against his or her own will. There was an exception, though, however, if a husband could have his wife committed without either a public hearing or her consent. This is a great way to get rid of your wife when you want to get remarried. You send her away,
Wow.
or if she's bothering you, thank God they don't have that anymore. Yeah. New York in 1860, we have our Married Women's Property Act granting married women the right to control their own earnings. So that's exciting. And then there's a provision 2 years later is amended that women lost equal guardianship of their children and only had veto power over decisions on apprenticeship and the appointment of a guardian. Also the part of the 1860 law that made husbands and wives equal in reality in cases of intimacy were overturned. So I guess women thought they were a little too powerful and they took that away from them. So it's basically, you really have no say in your children's upbringing. It's like a crazy thing. One thing that I thought that was interesting is kind of the reverse of this. One of my ancestors, the lady had passed in 1816. She passed during childbirth, and it was her 5th child. And her husband actually had to petition the court for a custody bond of his own children, because back then, I guess they had to, in order to be granted, which was like the reverse of it, he had to apply. I don't know if they would have been brought to orphanages or family members, but it's an interesting document. You can find those in the orphans courts. They have those listed. So where to find some of these records? Family Search, actually, that should be .org, not .com, is always free. It's a fantastic website. It's run by the Mormon Church. They currently have put all the microfilm that's in the giant library in Salt Lake City from all over the world is currently online. And it's going to take a few years, but they're processing it and they're indexing it. And but you can find some great stuff on there. Family Search, their paid company is Ancestry. So a lot of the stuff that you will see on Ancestry gets taken from Family Search. We also have newspapers.com, which is another of the Mormons' paid sites. It was originally part of the Ancestry package, but then they decided they can make more money if they split it up into some different groups. You can contact local town clerks. You can contact the historical societies, local libraries to get these information. Google Books, as I mentioned before, local churches for church records. I didn't put a church record up there. I'm sorry. I just thought about that. And as I mentioned before, when you're looking at Google Books, search for the town or the church so that you can kind of get the area. Now, one of the other things you could do is DNA. DNA is fantastic for breaking down brick walls. And there is one particular line that could be helpful to you. It is the mtDNA, also sometimes known as the umbilical line. There's a mitochondrial DNA, and we pass on, and this is, I'm going to say the stupidest comment ever here. So we pass on, women, our DNA to our children. That was our mothers, 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 mothers. It's the line, if you think about, that's going to follow the umbilical cord. That's what's going to bring it to them. Now, my children are boys. They have my mitochondrial DNA. Everybody has mtDNA. My sons will not be able to pass that DNA onto their children because they're not going to have an umbilical cord. Now, it doesn't get past the umbilical cord. It's just sometimes referred to that as. And my cousin, my cousin Susie on my mom's side had a baby, a girl. And I said, I was so happy when I found out it was a girl. And I said, she's going to be passing on the mitochondrial DNA. And no one had, they were like, what? And I was like, it's nothing. It's nothing. I was like, but it is something. It's something for everyone. So if you are interested in researching the straight back women's line, you can take you can take this, the mtDNA. Now, 23andMe offers a version of this, but it's not great. 23andMe was not created as a heritage company. It was created as a health-based company. However, there are several companies out there that sell only the mitochondrial DNA, also Y-DNA kits that will only focus on this. The problem that happens is these companies have a much smaller pool of not applicants, but that's the word I'm trying to say here, than something bigger like Ancestry. So while you're being able to trace your mitochondrial DNA, it's not going to be as great or as accurate as one of those bigger companies until a company like Ancestry really gets on board with this. But DNA in general, for all branches, is a great way to trace your maternal, paternal lines, whatever. I'm just going to hop over into chat. That's kind of all I have for, perfect timing. We have like a minute left. Great. Thanks, Joan, for putting that in there. Yeah, historic newspapers. Yep, you can get that website that Joan had just shared on chat. They do have that at the library. If you go into Live Library with Comswag, you can access, they have a whole bunch of really great genealogy resources.
Right.
From
You can actually get that just right from that link on the internet.
Perfect. Then do that.
Yeah. I don't know why libraries have it in their databases because
I guess
it's
just
free.
to be fancy.
Yeah, it's there, I guess.
I'm being spoiled lately because I got a job working for the big genealogy firm Legacy Tree, and with that, I got everything is free now to me, like all these subscription bases. So I sit up like in the middle of the night, and I'm just, I didn't even have ancestors in Scotland, but I'm looking at their records because I can. So I don't even know what's paid or free more so. Anybody have any questions or comments or anything, or?
What's the best way to find out about your ancestors in the old country, like before they came over here? Like I have their manifestations from the ships and everything, but is there any way?
Do you know
I have
what
to join?
Do you know what town they're from?
I only know what counties.
Ireland?
Ireland, yeah.
Check. I actually have, I'm debuting a new Irish genealogy class on the 16th.
Oh,
And yeah, so I'll talk about too, about just trying to pinpoint the towns in our country about it. But if you go on the website, Find My Past. Find My Past is a website. It's based in the UK, and they have really great records for Ireland and England.
oh,
It's
really?
really, yeah, it's really a must for that. And you said you took a DNA test?
Yes.
Upload your results, because you can go to Ancestry, and in the settings for the DNA, not the settings for a regular account, the settings for DNA, go into all the way
Okay.
down, and it'll say download my raw DNA. Click that. It'll save like a file to your computer. And then go to the website findmypast.com. I'll write in this here.
Find My Past.
Yeah, so findmypast.com.
Uh-huh.
And if you scroll to the bottom of Find My Past, you can upload your raw DNA for free. And you can see either your matches or your ethnicity for, oh, sorry, I just direct emailed Shelly. I apologize. I just emailed you to Find My Past. So you can either see your matches or the ethnicity for free, or if you pay $30 and it's a flat $30, you don't pay anything else, you can see everything. And you can connect. That is your best way of connecting to people over there who live there, of the Irish. And whereas we would give maybe Ancestry is just telling you you're Irish, or maybe if you're lucky a certain region, they can actually provide you sometimes with a city or town, connect you with it. So that's kind of cool.
Great, great. Okay.
And keep in mind too, like with DNA, Ancestry is an American-based company. So you have the places like Find My Past that is, based in the UK. There's also My Heritage, which is based in Germany. They have a lot of German records. They had a lot of French DNA, and last year they made it illegal to do a commercial DNA test in France because they had so many problems with like just people's family just getting ruined from these DNA results. But over there, like in I guess it would be the EU, a lot of people will test with My Heritage. And again, same free thing. You can upload it.
Okay. So myheritage.com, is it?
Yep. And it's the same thing, like $30.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions or anything?
I had, my grandparents are from Hungary.
Okay.
Austria-Hungary, and I actually was looking up, I mean, I've been on this since I was a kid, and I picked it up again, and I was looking where they were from in Burgenland, which is the southern part of Austria now. And there's actually a whole genealogy group online dedicated to this region, and a Facebook page, and they interpret stuff for you. They'll translate it for you and everything.
Awesome.
It's very cool.
What website is that? Because my father's parents came from Austria.
They're from a particular region called Burgenland. It was kind of between Austria and Hungary. So I find that people who came here before a certain time were Hungarian, and then after a certain time they said they were Austrian. So it's called the Burgenland Bunch. I think it's .org or something, but you can just do a Google search on Burgenland Bunch, and they have a great website with all kinds of genealogy resources there, and people who will connect with you.
Great.
I just got like really into this website. If you're on Facebook, I put in the chat, it's called Random Acts of Photo Restoration, and it is amazing. You put a photo and you have to like explain why this photo means something to you. And, just even something as my great-great-grandfather, whatever, I would love, to have this photo enhanced. And it is amazing these people are just so talented because you're not allowed to use photo editing apps. How they've colorized photos for me from the 1800s. They've restored photos, and it's a really good like feel good group. You know, like you're just looking for something like uplifting. But that's a really fun group if you put some ancestry photos on there to have it colorized or and everything's free.
And that's Random Acts of Photos?
Random Acts of Photo Restorations on Facebook.
No restorations.
I have a question about where to put your family tree. So I don't subscribe to Ancestry. I got it free through the library because of COVID.
Sure.
At home, and I put my family tree together. I used to have it on graph paper. I stuck it in an Excel document now. It's searchable. Do you have other recommendations?
I mean, I honestly do recommend Ancestry because I have a whole presentation on why I recommend Ancestry. By any chance, are you against putting it online?
No, not really. I even thought about making a website so I could share it with people.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I would do Ancestry because even if you don't have a membership, you can still put things in your gallery, which is on your profile page, and that will always be there for you. So you can upload your records and you can put it on there. There's actually, if you prefer a software version, there is, I was going to write the Family Tree Climber, but that's my business, but it was the Family Tree Maker.
No, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Family Tree Maker was the original floppy disk I used to have back in the 90s, and it was bought by Ancestry. And then now it's a software program that will sync up with Family Search, MyHeritage, and Ancestry. Really nice. And you make really nice charts on it.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Sure. Any other questions or anything for people?
I think that's it.
And also too, I don't know if anybody is aware, I do once a month with Kumswag, these one-on-one genealogy sessions. So if you have any questions, you can just email the programming department and they can set you up. I think my next one's next Tuesday. I don't have a calendar. I don't know why I'm looking for something with a date on it. But I believe it's next Tuesday, if that's the 9th.
9th.
Yeah, I think I'm with them. So I have some slots. So I've probably either have slots open then or the following month if you have any questions. And you'll have you fill out a little form beforehand so that I can kind of help you make the most out of our time together.
Oh, great.
Sure. And also too, if you are interested in any other genealogy talks, I do them all over the place. If you befriend me on, you have to put the Family Tree Climber. I have like this little squirrel emblem, you'll look for it. On Facebook, I post the links for my talks on a whole bunch of different topics.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for being my guinea pig for this talk. So
It was good.
thank you.
Very informative. Thank you.
I always
Thank
like talking to everybody here. So, and thank you, library, for setting this up.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions too, my email is sarah.min12@gmail.com. And my website is the Family Tree Climber. Again, you have to put the FamilyTreeClimber.com. All right. All right, everybody. We'll have a fantastic evening.
Thank
You
you.
too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.